So I'm Ruth Pongstaphone. I'm a theater director and independent scholar. I'm also adjunct faculty at Prescott College, and I'm involved as an adjunct in several other institutions in Southeast Asia. I don't thrive in stasis. I don't believe in stasis. I'm actually, I very much believe in Trotsky's theory of permanent revolution, which means that we are always transforming and we must, otherwise, we create a system of oppression. So, the idea of chaos to me is an idea of progress. When there's chaos, there's opportunity for us to evolve. As soon as we've initiated a system, it starts to lead towards fascism, basically. And when it goes so far as to become totally systemized, and we're very proud of our security and our stability, at that point, there is an oppressed group of people, many maybe, who are not represented by that system that need to overthrow it. And in a Trotskyian perspective, they would then, we would then all look at it and say, okay, let's overthrow this because it's only working for this many. So, chaos is useful. Chaos is important. And I think it's something, stability is the lie. Stasis is the lie, right? I mean, we know from physics, right? From from the laws of thermodynamics that there is no stasis. Things are in a constant process of transformation. Energy is neither created nor destroyed. It just changes form. So I really stay away from these binary thinkings of like good versus bad, improvement. Improvement is one thing. Yes, we have a condition, we can improve it. Once we improve it, some other condition suffers, we have to improve that. So what is it we're doing? We're balancing, right? Balancing doesn't have a good or a bad. It just has let's try to keep balancing.
What is the role of duality and polarity in theater, and how can it be applied into activism?
I think one of the things that is magical about theater is that we can experience something from multiple perspectives, right? So, and when we experience it live, it's different from once we've put something into film, it's set. The outcome is set. It will not change. No matter how many times you watch the horror movie, the monster will always pop out of the closet at that moment. It's never going to change. It's not going to change based on the audience and what the audience is giving the performer because it's done. But in theater, we provide a direct mirror. It's dangerous because it's live, because the actor is feeding off of the audience member, and the audience member is feeding off of the actor. So there's, whether it's a digital interface or a live physical interface where we can actually touch each other, it doesn't matter. If it's live, it's live. And that's what I think, some theater artists, maybe we're all grappling with this because we thought of theater as an analog form and video was entering as a design element. And now with, COVID-19 and the pandemic, we're, many of us who are getting very creative and asking this question of, yeah, well, what is it really? What does it consist of? And what I would say is it consists of that dangerous quality of the live event, that anything can happen. And you don't know if I'm going to do the same thing I did last night, right? I might make a different choice. And you also don't know, I mean, with a movie, you have the director of photography, and he's already decided for you with the director and the editor how he wants you to see this character and how he wants you to see through the eyes of that character. Your point of view is determined. Well, in theater, you've got a live human being in a space. You've got several maybe live human beings in space. So you can't really control who the audience is seeing through. They see through everyone all at once. They might choose one person one moment, and yet there's a connect that the actor can make too when they see an audience member. So it's already activated. If the actor is activated, then theater is activism. If we're looking, if we're looking at theater as entertainment of like, I'm going to show you a show and everybody, and there's going to be some dancing girls and some singing, and then you're going to go and have dinner. That's not theater. That's a show. That's a Vegas show, a cruise ship show, a Broadway show. Sure, it has its roots in theater, but theater is a mirror that we created for ourselves, and you don't need anything but human beings in space, live. Nothing. You don't even need costumes. You don't need a script. You don't need props. You just need more than one human being. A watcher and a doer, or both, doer, watcher, mirroring each other. So I think that's the most direct form of activism, because that's dialogue. That's dialogue. That's embodied dialogue. It's verbal dialogue. It's textual dialogue, visual dialogue. When you get that many forms of dialogue between people live, that's transformative. And you're seeing through all those perspectives. You can discuss a film after the fact. You can have an audience discussion and you can discuss the film, but you can't, and you can discuss it with the actors who were in it maybe. But it didn't just happen. You didn't just have it as an experience, living it together. You live it together. You go to the theater, you sit with the person, they're live, you and that audience, and the person next to you and the person on stage, you had an experience, a life experience together. Whatever they imagined, whatever you imagined is as real as the Coca-Cola you're going to buy from the hot dog man on the street when you leave the theater. You're going to remember that moment in the theater more than you're going to remember the Coca-Cola that you bought from the hot dog man, because that was banal.
Everything today, especially in major cities like New York, our lives are so predictable, or they're aimed to be so predictable, with technology and with just having that ability to just like look on your phone and know, oh, is there traffic over here, and just like everything is, you can predict a lot of things today. Whereas you look back in time, you look in different communities in maybe global south or really anywhere in the world that are just so much more in tune with that unpredictability, with that chaos.
Machines have given us the illusion of control. It's just an illusion. We're not in control. Well, we're just as much in control as the rabbits sitting in the desert outside on my house here.
There's a relationship with performing arts and fine art with that. And that I'm an abstract artist. I've always identified as an abstract artist because people will leave the theater having a different experience, and that's the goal of the performance, is that they want everyone to see different. That to me is just what art is. Isn't all art abstract? Isn't that kind of a metaphor for our lives?
I think that's wherein lies the importance of the audience discussion for me afterwards as a theater maker. And I'm so curious. For me, art is a query. Like you're very much like you're saying, art is a query. So I'm putting a question out there. I don't know what other people are going to see. It's not that I want them to see anything. I don't want them to come to my point of view. I want them to discover the questions I've been asking, and maybe their own questions, and let's ask them together. And then afterwards, let's talk about the questions that arose from experiencing the work. And it's that leads to the transformative social dialogue that I think expands our human interaction and our ability to think from different perspectives. I love it when I'm never disappointed if I, as a director, if I direct something and we have an audience discussion afterwards and someone says something that is maybe even the opposite of what I was trying to do in a scene. I'm fascinated. And I love that they saw that something different, and then it makes me more curious about where was that in there? That was subconsciously, somehow, subliminally, there was a truth in that. And I didn't even notice that it was coming out. And, so that's fascinating to me. Other people's perspectives, very much like you're saying about this, abstract art is a question. It's a question mark. I love, one of my favorite painters is Robert Motherwell, because I feel like Every one of these giant paintings that he made is this enormous, epic question. I don't know what it is. I don't know if he knew what it was, but I can stare at it for hours, wondering.
In the one of the readings that you assigned by David Lloyd, "The World is Made of Stories," he mentions three freedoms, which was really fascinating. Just like the opportunity to live in the story you identify with, and changing the stories and understanding the stories. How are these applied in theater?
So our reality, our collective reality, the social reality, the fabric of it that we've created, in most cultures, has social norms, has roles that we need, that we are constrained by, that we are told that this is how a daughter, this is a father, this is a carpenter, and this is what they wear, and this is how they behave. And in many cases, there are good reasons for this, and it actually makes society function well. But in some way, it does imprison us, and yet it doesn't need to, because when we have theater, we have like this. I often have this exercise that I do when I begin working with a new group, and I create a red square, a tape. I use red tape, and I create a square on the ground, and I say, inside that is the stage, and outside of it is our collective agreed upon reality, or so-called reality, right? And so all of these social rules and things that we deal with, cultural norms, exist in that outer area. So we have to behave like you would be, you're Jacob. So you have to play Jacob. When you come to class, you must play the role of Jacob the student. And I must play the role of Ruth, the adjunct faculty member. And we play our roles. And we have certain behaviors that are unacceptable or acceptable. And now, at some point, that does become oppressive. And yet we don't need to cause a revolution over it, because it's a small oppression that has useful purposes, structure, right? Okay, so here's the stage. You step onto the stage and you don't have to be Jacob anymore. You could be Zeus. You could be a Greek god. You could be a serpent. You could be the devil. You could be a woman. You could be the Queen of England, right? You could go through the actions like thinking about murdering your children, which is something you wouldn't want to do outside of the red tape square. But you can go into your imagination inside this area, and you can be whoever you want, your versions. You can explore a situation, any situation, the most horrific, the most wonderful situations that you wouldn't want to encounter. And you can free yourself for those moments, and you can discover who you would be in that situation. You can discover a different part of yourself. You can be King Lear for a moment and discover, what would that be like for you in this moment if it were happening now? When we live in our collective reality, we have a lot of self-consciousness. We're conscious of, is there something on my teeth? When I smile, did I say something in a tone? All of these questions that come up are self-conscious questions, right? Am I acceptable to the social environment in which I am swimming right now? The rage that would cause one to think about killing their children as an act of vengeance, the moment of decision, would you ever want to do this outside of that? No, it's horrific, but it's freeing. And afterwards, you go back to your container that we need to have a civilized and peaceful society in which we can get along, and you can behave yourself, but you were free for a moment to explore something outrageous, and it's safe. It's safe to the degree that you might get depressed if you're exploring a very depressive role, or you might have all kinds of emotional and physical experiences related to the exploration, but at least it's here. And it's here, and you're creating it, and you're the one who's generating it. And so it's cathartic because it belongs to you. You own it. And you can step in and out.
For me, that's I hear that, and it's very personal to me, because when I was in 10th grade in high school, we did a play, JB, which is a modernized Book of Job, and I played Satan, but I was like a popcorn peddler, accordionist Satan. And it was at that time, I was going through so much trauma and turmoil, And it was like, and I just remember like my teachers and some of the audience like coming up to me and my friend that played God, and they were concerned that we were actually brawling, that we actually had problems, and we were just like showing that on the stage. And to me, that was like the best review I could have possibly gotten. Like,
Yeah.
you actually thought that we had a problem. Like, so I don't know. I think part of me feels like I may have gone a little too far. Like I may have gone like too far into this role because there was so much like hatred and darkness inside of me at the time, and it like either needed that output, or that, or that output may have been, perpetuating it. I don't know.
Where would it be better? Where would it be better for this, all of this stuff that you're going through as a teenager? Is it better that it comes out on the stage, that it just comes out in a full blown fit of whatever on the stage, and afterwards you walk off and you go get an ice cream and sit with your friend? Or is it better that it gets pent up? It gets pent up. There is no stage. There is no stage. Reality is the stage. And one day you just go crazy on your friend for no reason, for no apparent reason, right? So, yeah, I think the stage provides a space of catharsis. It provides a space for therapy. I worked actually in a lot of outreach situations in Southeast Asia, where we use theater as a way of working with communities and with particularly youth at risk, people going through those kinds of experiences. I've worked with child soldiers who were kidnapped, and being rehabilitated, with child criminals. Um, and what happens is very transformative, because every oppression that has driven them or made them, or every trauma that has brought them to the point of committing a violent act, now has a space to be expressed. And the way that, the way that they interact with, over time, if I work with the group, the way that they interact with me will change. The first day is a challenge, and we have to sit down, and it's kind of like a lot of posturing, right? And then I have to get into my history and start explaining how I was in juvenile detention, and I'm not taking any crap. And, and then we have to get out the big tattoos and show them off. And after we get past that macho posturing, once we can get into theater, once you can awaken the imagination and you give them the power and you say that is a free space and you say whatever you want in that space, my God, what comes out is astonishing. And it goes from ugly to beautiful in a matter of a week, because it's allowed. And it goes from unclear, rageful, and undirected to articulate and rather eloquent.
Have you noticed any sort of transformation in the way that performance in general is perceived from an audience during times of crisis?
I find in times of crisis that people particularly turn to, live performance is something that people feel like if they can go. In Myanmar, even when it was banned, even when we would have a military curfew, people would go. We would hold performances in foreign institutes, because if you couldn't have a public gathering, it was against the law. So if we wanted to have a public local gathering, we would have it in the French Institute, so it's on French ground, and then we would invite the audience there. And the audiences were huge, huge, because it's different from watching a movie. A movie is the same as a government propaganda, So if you have an authoritarian regime barking propaganda at you, and then you watch a film and it's the same two-dimensional face, but then you have live music, poetry, dance, it doesn't matter. Performance art was huge in Myanmar during the regime, because it's face-to-face, it's connection, it's humans live, sharing themselves. And that's without any barrier, without any armor, right? In times of crisis, people look to live performance of all types, music, poetry, dance, theater, as not just catharsis, but a way to come to terms with what's happening, not in the way of sitting in front of a television screen and watching the news and going, okay, Okay. But in the way of with other people who are going through the same thing, going, okay, yeah, well, at least we're here live together. So yeah, I think it becomes more important. Maybe that's why you know, I just see times of crisis as different from crisis. I see times of crisis as times of evolution. So maybe when the news terms something a crisis, I think evolution. Now we have an opportunity to improve, to transform, to expand. Let's go.
Exploring the importance of different narratives. I think specifically in abolition, we talked about just hearing how a bunch of people joined together. There's a great article, Joining Forces, and how they worked so diligently together, even though they were all fighting for separate issues, they targeted one thing together. What is the importance of narratives, stories, or monologues in theater, and how can that support us now in the change that we want to see?
When we explore a narrative, so let's, for example, take the very traditional idea of theater. When we explore a narrative like a play on the stage, and you use it as a lens to see yourself, other people, your own time period, the present moment, and to ask questions of it. So there's this one element of Medea where she says, every time I have a choice, I know that there is a better way, and yet I continue to choose the worst. And so that's the question that was put forth for the audience, right? Um, so narratives give us the opportunity to explore questions about ourselves, our society, and different perspectives on those questions.
For you personally, I know you've mentioned that for you, crisis is evolution, but what else keeps you inspired and engaged in your work during a time of so much uncertainty and fear for so many of us?
If I'm certain about something, it's not interesting anymore. I mean, if you know how to do something, we'll do something else now, right? How many times are we going to do the same thing? I mean, researchers, right? I'm a researcher too. If you find the answer to your question, your job is over as a researcher. Research, when you research, you ask one question, which opens another. It's like opening Pandora's box. It opens another question, another question, another question, another question, and you've got the rest of your life you're asking questions. So certainty, boring. Nothing is certain. If we say that things are better or worse, we set ourselves up for, I don't know, something. I prefer not to think about what I dislike, because if I dislike something, that means I'm not very creative and I can't see it as an interesting parameter to use. So like and dislike, boring. Things are interesting or not interesting.